In Sweden, Vinod and Nilam gave birth to Annie Nina Hindocha, who is now 28 years old. Her family was originally from Uganda, but they were compelled to leave in the early 1970s when Idi Amin, the ruler of the nation, ordered all South Asian Ugandans 90 days to go. The family moved to Maristad before Annie was born after being given residence in Sweden. Annie's brother was called Anish and her sister was named Amy. Vinod, Annie's father, established a prosperous company in Sweden and led a stable, intellectual, ambitious, and self-assured household. Though he couldn't help himself, Vinod admitted that he spoiled her. Annie was referred to by her cousin as the family's glue and leader. Following her graduation from college, Annie relocated to Stockholm to work in mobile phone marketing. As she approached her mid-20s, Maker Eriksson was seeking a partner and a place to call home. She was eager to create a family of her own and loved her sister's kids. When she traveled to London on a regular basis, she would shop, mingle, and establish relationships. She will soon meet Iwani from Bristol and Shri, who is 30 years old. A billionaire before the age of 30, he worked in his family's nursing home company and was well respected and prosperous. Annie's aunt had seen him around and believed that he would be the ideal match for her niece. His sister said that even though Annie didn't appear to like him right away after the second date, she had warmed up to him after setting up their meeting at a coffee shop. The wedding was called off because of what were characterized as trivial family disputes, although Sharian had previously been engaged. Shrian's parents also fled Uganda for the same reason, therefore their lives were quite similar to Annie's. People at Annie's had different thoughts about Shrian. Some said that he was a haughty person who enjoyed flaunting his money, while others claimed that behind it all, he was really extremely kind and caring. Annie would often tell about how much she liked Sharia's sense of humor, and how he made her feel safe, according to Annie's sister. Things became difficult for the pair when they started dating long distance, seeing one other alternately. According to friends, they often quarreled, most likely over distance, and were both quite stubborn. They later reconciled, with Annie quitting her work in Stockholm and moving into an apartment in Luton to be nearer to the pair. At one point, Annie ended the relationship. Her parents quickly traveled to meet Shireen's family, and while I would recall feeling a little frightened by the Dewani family's affluence, I also said that they were really kind and hospitable. Everyone had praised Shrian, according to Vinod. He was kind, intelligent, and motivated, and the pair seemed to click well. After the visit ended and both parents had given their approval for the pair and their families, Vinod said that Annie's statement that Shrian did not believe in having sex before marriage demonstrated his commitment to his faith and that Annie would be his future bride. In October 2010, hundreds of people gathered just outside of Mumbai to celebrate the 3-day wedding of Sri Dewani and Annie Hinduja, who had planned to wed in October. It was a truly exquisite event, and Annie had spent 3 months in India planning it. Vinod said that although his family were not wealthy like the Dewanis, he had been saving for his children's wedding since they were born, and wanted to give Annie everything she had dreamed of, as picture-perfect as the wedding had seemed. Some of Annie's close friends recalled feeling weird about it, with one of her friends saying it didn't feel like Annie was very present, and someone else referring to the wedding as a strange experience that didn't feel like the friend she knew. The 3-day event would soon be over, and Shri and Anni Dewani would be heading off for their honeymoon. 3 weeks after their gorgeous wedding, the couple headed to South Africa on their 10-day honeymoon. Annie had no idea where they were going, and the whole thing had been planned by Shrian. He had told people he chose South Africa because it was AS for Shrian and an A for Annie. After a busy and eventful few days, they arrived at Cape Town International Airport from Johannesburg. On Friday, November 12th, Shreem was looking to flag down a taxi instead of using the hotel's dedicated car service. He opted for the local shuttle service at a cheaper rate. A driver named Zola Tongo pulled over in a Volkswagen minivan, and the couple began the 20-minute drive to their lavish waterfront hotel called Cape Grace, before Zola dropped the Dewanis at their Hotel Shri and asked Tongo to wait for him so he could make plans for him to pick them up the following night for dinner. Sharing said he wanted Tongo to show the couple around Cape Town as well, and Tongo agreed to act almost as an unofficial tour guide for the pair the following day before the couple were picked up by Tongo. They spent time at the bar having some drinks and taking pictures. One of the most famous restaurants in the neighborhood, 96 Winery Road, was the one Shireen had booked a seat at. It was about 7:30 p.m. when Tongo picked up the pair. However, while driving to the restaurant, Shri and Annie decided they wanted something lighter instead of a large supper. Tongo promised to escort them to the proper location, saying he knew it. Just before 9 o'clock at night, he turned off the highway and finally dropped them off at Strand's Surfside restaurant. They were picked up by Tongo at around 10:30 p.m. after a brief stay. Annie was eager to experience the authentic and unadulterated culture of some regions of South Africa, particularly the township nightlife, according to Shri and Annie. She demanded that Tongo drive around and give them a taste of what it was like, he claimed. The trio took a car into Guguletu Township. Residents of Guguletu claim that it is uncommon to even leave their houses after midnight, let alone have visitors come, and that the area still has a very high crime rate. Between the years 2005 and 2010, Guguletu saw almost 700 murders, or one every 2.5 days for 5 years in a row. According to the police, they wouldn't even go into some villages without a large group. When Tongo pulled over at a crossroads at 10:45, 2 armed guys suddenly rushed the car and began beating on the windows. The men eventually forced Tongo out of the car and took control. They drove around for nearly an hour while the terrified couple huddled together in the back seat. During this time, the men took Shreen's watch and phone, as well as Annie's jewelry. After some time, the car finally stopped. The driver reassured the couple that they did not intend to harm them, but would release them separately. Without warning, they threw Shreen out onto the road. The armed men then sped off into the night, leaving him behind, while Annie remained in the vehicle, overwhelmed with fear. At around 10:30 p.m., a man opened his door to find Shreen standing in front of him, crying and desperate for help. Shreen asked if there was a nearby place where he could report a carjacking. He had been wandering in distress, knocking on doors, moving from one house to another in the darkness. The man asked Shreen for details, but he was too shaken and confused to recall much. Shortly after, the police arrived and took him back to the location where the incident had occurred. They drove around with him, trying to piece everything together. It wasn't long before they also found the taxi driver, Zola Tongo, who had reported the carjacking. Together, they all returned to the Cape Grace Hotel. At the hotel, the manager spoke with both Shreen and Tongo. He found it unusual that a newlywed couple staying at such a luxurious hotel would want to drive through dangerous townships like Guguletu in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, back in Bristol, Vinod received a phone call from Prakash Dewani, informing him that Annie had been kidnapped. Vinod remained hopeful, believing they could pay any ransom demanded and secure Annie's safe return. A short while later, Vinod received another call, this time from Shreen. He was heartbroken and apologized for not being able to protect Annie. Overcome with fear and desperation, Vinod immediately booked the first available flight for the following morning. Early the next day, police received a call from a resident in Khayelitsha, a neighborhood about a 20-minute drive from Guguletu. The caller reported that a gray Volkswagen minivan had been parked along the road all night. At 8 a.m., the police arrived at the scene. When they opened the vehicle, they found Anni Dewani's lifeless body lying across the back seat. She had been shot. Annie was shot once at point-blank range in the neck, and the bullet became lodged in the seat. She also had bruises on her body. The coroner confirmed that she would have tragically bled to death. Her father received the devastating news just as he was boarding his connecting flight from Amsterdam. He later described feeling completely numb throughout the journey. The next day, he met Shreen at the Cape Grace Hotel. One of the officers who arrived at the crime scene that morning sensed immediately that this would not be a straightforward case. Something about it felt off. He noted that Zola Tongo, the taxi driver, was very familiar with the area, well enough to know its dangers. Given this knowledge, he should have been able to identify the two men involved. The officer also questioned why a taxi driver would take tourists through such a dangerous neighborhood, especially at night. When asked about it, Tongo insisted that it was Shreen's request. However, Annie's sister strongly disagreed, saying that Annie was well aware of the risks and would never have willingly gone there. The officer also found it puzzling that the attackers allowed both Tongo and Shreen to leave unharmed. They knew that both men would immediately go to the police and could potentially identify them. Yet, Annie was taken alone and later shot. That just doesn't add up, the officer recalled. The murder of Anni Dewani was shocking, not only to her loved ones but to the entire city of Cape Town and beyond. While crime was an issue in the area, this particular case was especially appalling and tragic by any standard. Annie's tale received extensive international media attention and occupied a significant amount of news space. Hours after the vacation started in Cape Town this morning, a British couple's honeymoon ended tragically. In Kailicha, a 28-year-old woman's corpse was discovered in a vehicle. She was traveling with a 28-year-old lady who was also an official. They devoted a great deal of time and resources to the issue because they were eager to find a solution to something that had gained so widespread attention so rapidly. At first, Zola Tongo was eager to answer the police's inquiries and was quite cooperative. The two guys who had hijacked the car were soon found, and the case was progressing swiftly. Police immediately went to Khalil Mengani after seeing a royal on the card. His prints had been kept on file since his arrest a number of years before. When police searched his house after he was arrested, they discovered a phone stuck between the mattress and the bed frame. Mengani said that it belonged to Zola Tongo, the cab driver, when they inquired about its owner. Mengani nearly quickly admitted his role. He informed the police that Zwama Doda, 26, was the third individual they were trying to find. 2 days after Kwabe Kwave was discovered, Shreen had already taken a plane back to the UK. Kwave added a third and fresh name to the mix as he was being questioned. On Monday, he was being taken in as he passed Mondo Malombo, a receptionist at another hotel, who had been spotted fleeing one of his interviews. He would respond in English when Kwabe requested the cops if he may talk to him. "Tell them everything," he urged. Another notification from the police was imminent. The 31-year-old cab driver, who had been so cooperative and open with investigators, had also been taken into custody in relation to Anni Dewani Zola's murder. According to Tongo's acquaintance, it was completely unexpected since he had no criminal history and had always been so careful and law-abiding. They said that it was difficult to believe, but Shree informed a reporter that he had a suspicion that Tongo was involved. Thus, the arrest wasn't entirely unexpected. Annie was ultimately buried as the media frenzy continued. Annie's memorial ceremony would draw 1,500 people to a London music hall, and her ashes would subsequently be spread at her favorite part of the Vänern Lake near her Swedish homeland. As the police inquiry proceeded, Zola Tongo would, to their astonishment, make an allegation so compelling and shocking that it would entirely upend the case. Tongo's face was covered by a sheet when he was led into the Windberg magistrates' courts. He was expected to make a plea deal and earn a less sentence in return for new details about the crime, according to the announcement. Tongo said that he wanted to be completely honest about what had really transpired that evening, and that this was not a random assault. He said that Shreen, Annie's husband, had really planned the murder of his new wife and planned the whole crime. He said that on the day he brought Sharian and Ali up from the airport, Annie went inside while Shreen stayed outside to chat with him. The CCTV shows that Shreen and Tongo conversed in the vehicle for over 10 minutes. According to reports, Shreen said that he wanted someone removed from the scene. Although he wasn't the right person for the task, Tongo told Shreen that he knew someone who might help him with his request. He said that in order to carry out the alleged hits, Shreen promised 15,000 rand, which at the time was less than 1,000 pounds. The huge quantities of CCTV video seemed to support Tongo's assertions, according to the police, while others said that the CCTV also supported Shree's account of events and side of the tale. Tongo said that when he left, he went to the hotel where Monday worked, where Monday spoke with Kwabai, and the plot was initiated. Tongo, the CCTV system at the hotel where Monday worked, recorded audio of Monday's numerous attempts to contact Quabe, and during one of the calls he said, "It's that thing we were talking about. It has to take place today." Tonga claimed to have met Shreen just before noon on the day of the murder in order to get his money converted. He then drove him to a location with a lower conversion rate than the hotel. Vinod claimed that he called Annie, but Shreen answered and said he was actually at the market changing some money. Vinod didn't think much of it and simply asked that she call him back later. Tongo claimed that on the night of the murder, Shreen pulled him aside outside the Surfside restaurant and asked if he had made arrangements for the guys. He confirmed that everything had been arranged, and they started driving into Googler. It was alleged that Shreen had informed Tongo that the cash was in an envelope inside a pouch behind the front seat. Police stated that text messages and phone calls between the two were confirmed through cell phone data analysis. However, since Shreen's phone was never recovered, the exact content of these messages would likely remain unknown. The case became a media sensation, and the public was divided, unsure of what to believe. If the proposed plea deal for Tongo was to proceed, Annie's family had to be consulted. It was an agonizing and heartbreaking decision for them, but ultimately, they all agreed to let Tongo accept the deal. Despite their grief and confusion, their main priority was uncovering the truth about what had happened to Annie. The overwhelming public interest in Annie's case became even more evident when the court proceedings began. The story was massive and seemed to grow more surreal with each passing day. Shreen and his family strongly denied all allegations, calling them completely absurd and lacking any real evidence. His defense team, consisting of two of the most influential and successful lawyers in the country, argued that it was simply unbelievable that Shreen would have asked the first person he met in Cape Town to orchestrate a hit on his wife. They contended that the prosecution's claims were illogical and unsupported by concrete evidence. Just over a month after Annie's tragic death, the case continued to unfold, with many unanswered questions still lingering. Zola Tongo reached a plea deal on Monday and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Soon after, inquiries were conducted, and both of them began blaming Tree and Dewani. A reduced term would also be given to Kwabo, who would accept it in return for a guilty plea, his pledge to testify against Shreen, and any further criminal procedures pertaining to the crime for which he was later imprisoned for 25 years. Mangani will subsequently enter a not guilty plea in court after receiving no form of settlement. Authorities said that because he couldn't have advanced the case farther than any other party, there was no need in making him a plea bargain. After undergoing surgery to remove a brain tumor, Mangani's trial was postponed. Still, he was found guilty and given a life sentence. Attorneys for both Kwabe and Mangani said that since police were under such pressure to resolve such a well-known case, their clients had been mistreated, even tortured. All of the accusations were refuted by the police. The hotel receptionist acknowledged his role on Monday, but he was given complete protection from prosecution in return for giving an honest statement against Shreen. This was shocking to many, since he was the one who called Kwabe and planned the attack. Monday said, "I want to state it here that Mr. Dewani is lying. He knows everything from the beginning to the end. Shreen would soon find himself arrested in Bristol on suspicion of conspiring to murder Annie, and South African authorities were now fighting to extradite him. But despite what the men were saying, there still didn't appear to be any motive. People said he wouldn't have gained anything from Annie's death financially, as there was no life insurance policy, and by all accounts there didn't appear to be any issues within the couple's relationship. But an interview with the Sun newspaper was later published, which gave the South African police a potential motive if Shreen was involved. Anonymous emails have been sent to the Sun suggesting that Shreen was gay, and people allege that he had been paying a male prostitute for sex. His name was Leopold Laser and was known to his clients as the German Master, Leopold told the Sun that Shrine had confided in him that he was in a relationship that he needed to get out of Shireen, and his family had maintained that this was all nonsense, and said that he was blissfully happy with his new bride. "I just married the girl of my dreams." He said, "Why would I want to kill her?" But police began speculating that perhaps Annie had found out during the honeymoon that Shireen was keeping this potential secret about his sexuality, and this is what sparked the later events. In his 36 years of work, one of the top detectives said that this case had become the most well-known and confrontational he had ever encountered. Vinod eventually said that things had started to eat away at him more and more over time, despite his vehement defense of anybody who suggested his son-in-law could have been involved. There are a lot more questions than answers after my conversation with my son-in-law. He claimed that many South African reporters and journalists concurred that, despite the high crime rate in the area, something didn't add up. One reporter stated that this was not a typical crime at all, and that the fact that the car was simply left there instead of being burned or sold on Vinod was a major red flag. For instance, Sharian told authorities that Quabe and Mengani had taken all of Annie's jewelry, but after Annie was found, he called an officer to ask him to check his seam in the back seat of the car. Sure enough, there was Annie's 25,000-pound engagement ring. When asked why this wasn't in his initial statement, Sharian replied that he was shocked at the time and now wanted to retract his statements. The night before Annie's burial, Shireen had also hosted a pizza party, which Vinod said he thought was very impolite and improper. Shireen was quite harsh with Annie's body while attempting to clothe her, which Annie's cousin said made her very uncomfortable. Annie's relatives remembered that Shireen was upset that they had come to say farewell to Annie before she was buried. The notes and flowers the family had placed with Annie's corpse wound up on the floor when she snatched them and flung them down, according to her cousin, who subsequently apologized to the family and acknowledged that his actions were inappropriate. Max Clifford was employed by the Dewani family to deal with the deluge of media attention. Famous London press agency Max Clifford has worked with Marvin Gaye, Marlon Brando, and Muhammad Ali, among other luminaries. In the PR industry, he was formerly highly regarded and in high demand, but in 2014, he fell from favor dramatically. He was found guilty of a series of indecent attacks on young girls and given an 8-year jail term. While working on Sreen's case, he would subsequently have a heart attack and pass away in jail. While in prayer, Shrayan's brother insisted that Annie's family sign a contract committing them to refraining from speaking to the media without first contacting Vinod was first rejected by Max Clifford. Shreem was sent to Bristol's Priory Hospital, where it was reported that he had post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Shortly after being imprisoned under the Mental Health Act, Max Clifford reported that Shireen had lost 28 pounds since the death of his wife and was becoming thinner and weaker. Because to his mental health problems, the extradition proceedings for Shreem were postponed for a lengthy period before starting at London's Belmar Magistrates Court. Annie's brother stated, "We are just focusing on this case at the moment, and it is hard to even start making the grieving process final yet, because there are so many questions we need answers to." Annie's uncle added, "We don't understand why Sriyan doesn't just get on a plane and go and tell his side of the story." An order for Sriyan's extradition to South Africa was signed by Theresa May, the Home Secretary and then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Sharia pleaded not guilty to each of the 5 accusations against him, and a trial was scheduled. In a written statement read aloud by his attorneys on the first day of his trial, the court learned more about his sexual orientation. Sharian admitted that he was bisexual in spite of his prior denials. Annie's family expressed their displeasure at not knowing this about him and threatened to sue him for deceiving them. The prosecution claimed that in addition to the statements made by the German master Leopold and a number of other people, the court's list of omissions also revealed that Srin had been browsing gay porn and dating websites during the honeymoon. This, they said, clearly showed that Shrine was conflicted and desperate to hide a big part of his life. They contended that this had less to do with his sexual orientation than it did with the discussions in which he had expressed his want to leave the marriage. After hearing arguments on both parties, Judge Jeanette Traverso declared that the testimony about Shrine's sexual orientation was not admissible. On behalf of the prosecution, further witnesses testified that despite its seeming perfection, Srina Nani's relationship was everything but. According to Annie's cousin, Annie had spoken to her shortly after the wedding and asked whether she had made a great mistake by marrying him. Annie texted her relatives often, saying things like, "Hate him," and "fight a lot." "I'm going home," Srian informed him. "I regret being engaged in the first place." One that was really depressing to read. "My new pastime is crying." Annie sent another message stating, "Really trying," only one day into the honeymoon. "Even though he's a genuinely kind man overall, I'm not satisfied with him." Others said that whatever arguments the couple had were completely typical and insignificant, and that Annie could have been more emotional and exhausted from the strain of organizing such a large wedding. Police and the prosecution claimed that Zola Tongo, the state's star witness, was the key to the case. Since he was the only one who spoke with Shri, he was the only one who could attest to the purported plot. The court was given a great deal of CCTV material. In one tape, Tongo and Shri were seen conversing in the hotel lobby the day after Annie was murdered. Music. Also visible in the shot was one of the cleaners. Tongo said that throughout the brief exchange between Shrian and the cleaner, Shrian was pleading with him to respect the individual's privacy. Shrian reportedly asked Tongo whether the task was finished after the cleaner left. According to Tongo, he informed Shrian that a camera was directly above. Shrian glances up, looks at the camera for a moment, then turns away. This was a completely harmless exchange, according to Shrian. The video continued, showing Tree and Tongo reuniting at the hotel. Some kind of white envelope or parcel is seen being carried by Shrian, who had been seated with Vinod in one of the rooms. Tongo takes the identical bundle and follows him to a different room away from Vinod and the other visitors. Tongo then exits the hotel and makes his way back to his vehicle as Shrian returns empty-handed. Shrian's attorneys claimed that the money was just for his driving services, but the state said that they thought this was the amount given for the hit. This made perfect sense, according to some. Others asked if this was the fact and why Annie's father was not there at the money transaction, which happened in a private setting off-camera. Srin said that the witch hunt against me and the subsequent inability to find the truth about what had transpired that evening were caused by the evidence of these convicted liars. After Sharia was cleared, Annie's family was upset and claimed they were let down by the legal system just as Annie had been let down. In order to force Srian to publicly respond to inquiries, Annie's family requested that the UK Coroner's Court restart the inquiry into her death. According to Coroner Andrew Walker, there was not enough reason to begin an inquiry, and he was not allowed to draw a decision that differed from what the South African courts had determined. Judge Traverso was the target of a formal complaint alleging prejudice, with many believing that Shrian ought to have been forced to testify and take the stand. She would subsequently be exonerated of these charges. Eventually, Mengani passed away in jail while still afflicted with a brain tumor. The court case was believed to have caused Leopold Laser, the guy who had disclosed to the papers his covert connection with Shrian, to be under a great deal of stress. Sadly, recent sources state that he committed himself in 2016. Shri and his then 18-month partner were still residing in the UK as of 2018. Zola Tongo was eligible for parole in 2021 after completing half of his term, and his father and uncle visited him in jail before to his planned release. They said that when they showed him a photo of Annie, he exhibited no emotion and didn't recognize her. He began to weep as they revealed her identity. Both guys said that he was a very good actor, but that they weren't convinced it was genuine feeling or that he felt regret for what he had done. Then, one day before to his release, his parole was revoked. Anni Dewani's murder is a contentious issue that still affects her family. Many believe that it was a totally random carjacking that resulted in murder, whether on purpose or accidentally. Anything that seems to point towards Shrian is unfair, unjust, and unsupported by proof. Everything that transpired in between is entirely accidental. Some believe Zola Tongo was the one who planned it. Others think that Shri planned the whole operation and got away with a heinous crime. But he saw a chance to abduct Annie and use her as part of an extortion scheme that went catastrophically wrong when he noticed the glitzy pair with their pricey bags and possessions. Annie's friends and family are still looking for answers, and the more time goes by, the worse things are for them. We still don't know precisely what occurred, Annie's uncle stated. It creates a great deal of uncertainty. Knowing what occurred is not the same as speculating about it. We are curious as to what transpired. The whole reality of what transpired that night, how it came to be, and what, if any, relationship the five men had on that fatal night back in 2010 will probably never be discovered because to the divergent claims and recollections from so many people.